kind, I don't think it's an exaggeration, will depend on what happens in the next 10, 15 years. And this time scale for business is nothing, is an instant. So yes, we have to try everything in hand, and my guess is that if the private sector gets organized through sectors, economic sectors, there should be a way of working together. We are far away from the times where we thought that no need for a close cooperation with governments was required, because the private sector was willing to deliver anyway. Absolutely not. Even, as you know, in Mexico we have a voluntary corporate accounting, and it did not work until the government gave a blessing and participation in it. So we had to set the standards, to organize a political dialogue with private sector, to get them into an endeavor that supposedly was purely private from the beginning. So we have to explore different models at the same time, and to do that in a hurry, because otherwise the price we will be paying for inaction will be very soon crippling both for the government and for the private sector.
Thanks, Fernando. Let me turn to Rudy first for a moment. You've now established a Business Council for Sustainable Development in Indonesia. We applaud you for this. Obviously, there was a need. There was a perception from the part of business that you have to get in the forefront, that you have to have an interaction with the global business community, with the Indonesian authorities, with the civil society. How do you see the Business Council of Indonesia moving this agenda forward? You're a very young organization, or about to be born probably, but how do you see in your mind, what's the agenda that you'll be setting in terms of moving down this low carbon pathways?
Well, first of all, on the carbon, Indonesia still underdeveloped CDM opportunity, new but still immature concept of reduced emission on degradation and deforestation. Many regulations yet to be formalized, much expected of Indonesia, but enabling environment from policy not yet, government policy not yet in place. On the carbon, not just need a price, but also who has the right to manage the carbon? Who does carbon belongs to in Indonesia? Still being discussed, particularly relevant to land management, forestry, and carbon. Does carbon belong to government, the land managers? Who has it? So business in Indonesia still need answer to this simple question before the progress can be made. And on the WBCSD, of course, I think the sustainable development right now, I believe it is a key success factor, all right? And then in Indonesia, there is a lot of gap, actually, perception from different stakeholders, government, civil society, and the business. And the sustainability development itself in Indonesia, I think, well, still quite new. So we need to gather together, have a same perception, and how to move forward for better Indonesia. I think that's my opinion. Thank you.
I'm conscious, I'm looking at my watch and I'm wondering if I'm somewhere wrong, but the way I read it, we need 10 minutes from Adam at the end, so I'll go to Peter for one more question, and then we'll go to questions for you, Claude, if you have. There's no questions. Everything is crystal clear. Okay, Claude, you've been very much in the public arena, very much in the public opinion business for many years now. What do you think is the reaction of the public to all this? How do you read the public? You know, it's been a tremendous change, a very rapid change. We've seen Al Gore, we've seen IPCC getting a Nobel Prize. But how is what is the public reaction, especially in the States, which is coming a little bit late, but is growing very, very rapidly?
Is this mic working?
Yes, it is.
Some broad strokes, Andre. It's a much finer picture and I can't paint it. What has happened in the States in the past 18 months is sometimes misunderstood. What has really happened is business has removed its veto from the U.S. acting. U.S. has a complicated system of parallel interests. When business says no, it's very hard for the U.S. to act. And business has removed its veto, and in some forums is even now supportive of serious action. China, I'm going to stick my neck out and give you a personal point of view. China is now seized with this problem. That does not mean, in my view, that China knows exactly where it wants to go, but the level of attention to this problem is totally different than it was 2 years ago. Now, I don't imagine most of you read People's Daily very often. Anybody happen to see People's Daily on Friday, November 16? If anybody did, you will remember what was on the front page. A lead article in which the head of China's meteorological agency, i.e. Weather Bureau, announced that given predicted temperature increases, China's agricultural production would probably drop 10%. Lead article in China's Daily by the head of a small agency who was newly appointed. This didn't happen because this new head of a small agency got up and said, I think I'll go down to Starbucks and have breakfast with my friend, the reporter. So I think China is focused on it. I also think they are girding for a tough negotiation with the next American president, which they know they will have. Look, both of those are good developments, in my opinion. The third thing I would point to is, and I'm going to ask Fernando to help me here if I express this in an impolitic way, but it's very visible to me here at Bali compared to where we were a year or two ago, which is what we call fondly the developing world in all its different colors, stripes, and degrees of being much more developed than developing, is beginning to wrestle with the elements of this problem and propose things rather than to make speeches, if I could put it that. Am I too simple, Fernando?
You're absolutely right. I think that a number of developing countries is ready to move in ways that were not thinkable just a couple of years ago. And this is irrespective of what happens with the business veto or former veto in your country. My guess is that something will be on the table that makes advanced developing countries move forward in a much broader context.
Well, thank you very much. I am being furiously pointed at by Claude Fussler, who tells me that we're short 10 minutes somehow from somewhere. And as such, I'm sorry, but I would have to now go to Adam Kirkman and ask him to draw the conclusions from this policy discussion. Adam?
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you, Andre, and thank you to the panel for this session. If I could have the... So I'll move through this fairly quickly, but what I would like to do is, as you know, the purposes of these sessions is to link these discussions back to the actual agenda here at COP. And if I could have the first slide, please. Please.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we look at where we are today, but where we've actually come from in a very short time, if we just go back to as far as 2000, essentially the debate at these COPs was about mitigation and a little bit about adaptation. But where we actually find ourselves today, as Ivo was talking about, in terms of looking at the building blocks around a future framework, we're actually starting to look at what is basically a very different picture. And as Andre mentioned in his introductory comments, investment is basically the key or a large piece of the puzzle in terms of what's actually going to be needed in a post-2012 framework, which people here today and in the hotels down the road are trying to kickstart the